What if one of the most terrifying prophecies in the Bible is no longer symbolic, but unfolding in real time before our eyes? A river once described as a boundary of the end times is slowly disappearing. And what is emerging from beneath it is not just exposed earth, but something humanity was never meant to see. The Euphrates River, one of the most historically significant waterways in human civilization, has long been more than just a source of life. It was the cradle of Mesopotamia, a region often referred to as the birthplace of civilization itself, where some of the earliest cities, writing systems, and laws were formed. For thousands of years, it sustained empires, defined borders, and carried the weight of both history and myth. Today, however, something unprecedented is happening. The river is shrinking at an alarming rate, and the consequences extend far beyond environmental concern. According to data from NASA Earth Observatory published in 2021, satellite imagery has shown dramatic reductions in water levels across both the Euphrates and Tigris river systems. These findings are supported by hydrological studies published in the journal Water by MDPI, which highlight that a combination of prolonged drought, climate change, upstream dam construction in Turkey, and increasing water consumption has significantly reduced the river's flow. In some regions, entire sections of the riverbed have been exposed, revealing cracked earth where water once ran continuously for millennia. This is not a localized phenomenon, but a large-scale transformation that has caught the attention of scientists, historians, and theologians alike. Yet what makes this moment truly unsettling is not just the drying river itself, but the timing and the deeper implications tied to it. For centuries, the Euphrates has been referenced in religious texts, particularly in the Bible, where it holds symbolic and prophetic meaning. In Revelation 16:12, the river is described as drying up to prepare the way for events associated with the end times. For many, this was always interpreted metaphorically, a poetic representation of change or upheaval. But now, as satellite data confirms that the river is physically receding, that interpretation begins to shift. The imagery is no longer abstract. It is visible, measurable, and happening now. This convergence between ancient text and modern observation raises a question that is difficult to ignore. Are we witnessing a natural consequence of human activity and environmental imbalance? Or are we standing at the intersection of something far older, something written long before modern science ever existed? To understand the gravity of this moment, it is important to look beyond the surface. Rivers do not simply disappear overnight, especially ones as large and historically stable as the Euphrates. Their decline is usually gradual, influenced by complex interactions between climate, geology, and human intervention. The construction of major dams, such as the Ataturk Dam in Turkey, has significantly altered the natural flow of water downstream, reducing the volume reaching Syria and Iraq. Combined with rising global temperatures, which accelerate evaporation and reduce rainfall, the system has been pushed toward instability. Reports from the United Nations have warned that water scarcity in the region could reach critical levels within decades if current trends continue. But even with these explanations, something about the present situation feels different. The rate of change, the visibility of the riverbed, and the simultaneous emergence of unusual phenomena have created a sense that this is not just another environmental crisis, but a turning point. As the water recedes, it does not simply reveal dry land. It exposes layers of history that have been hidden for centuries, possibly even millennia. Sediment that once lay undisturbed beneath flowing water is now open to the air. Structures that were buried and forgotten are beginning to take shape again. This process, known in archaeology as exposure through erosion or water withdrawal, is not uncommon in smaller contexts, but rarely does it occur on a scale this vast. Entire stretches of land that were inaccessible are now visible, and with them come questions that extend far beyond science. What was hidden beneath the Euphrates all this time? And why is it only appearing now? There is also a psychological dimension to this transformation. For generations, the Euphrates represented continuity. It was a constant in a world of change, a river that flowed through history without interruption. Its presence was taken for granted, much like the idea that certain boundaries in nature are fixed. But when something that has always been there begins to vanish, it forces a reassessment of what we consider stable. The disappearance of water from such a symbolic location does not just alter the landscape, it alters perception. It challenges assumptions about permanence and raises the possibility that other things we consider unchanging may also be subject to sudden transformation. At the same time, the cultural and religious significance of the Euphrates cannot be ignored. In ancient Mesopotamian texts, the river was often associated with divine order and cosmic balance. It marked not just physical territory, but also the boundary between known and unknown, between civilization and wilderness. In biblical narratives, it appears repeatedly as a point of reference, a line that separates different stages of human history. When such a symbol begins to change in a visible and undeniable way, it naturally draws attention from those who see meaning beyond to the material. This does not necessarily imply that the events are supernatural, but it does explain why they are being interpreted through multiple lenses: scientific, historical, and spiritual all at once. Another factor that adds to the complexity of this situation is the role of modern technology. Unlike in the past, when changes in the natural world might go unnoticed or undocumented, today we have satellites, drones, and advanced imaging systems that allow us to observe even the most subtle shifts in real time. The data collected is precise, verifiable, and widely accessible. This means that what is happening to the Euphrates is not speculation. It is recorded, analyzed, and confirmed by multiple independent sources. And yet, despite this clarity, the interpretation of these events remains uncertain. The facts are clear, but their meaning is still open to debate. As more of the riverbed becomes exposed, researchers are beginning to explore areas that were previously unreachable. Initial surveys have focused on mapping the newly visible terrain, identifying geological features, and assessing the stability of the ground. In doing so, they have encountered formations that do not fit easily into existing categories. Some appear to be natural, shaped by centuries of water flow and sediment deposition. Others, however, show signs of structure, patterns that suggest deliberate design rather than random formation. Straight lines, consistent angles, and repeated markings are not typically produced by erosion alone. They hint at the possibility that parts of what is being uncovered may have been created by human hands, or at least influenced by them. This is where the narrative begins to shift from environmental observation to something more complex. The drying of the Euphrates is not just revealing land, it is revealing anomalies. And with each new discovery, the line between natural explanation and unexplained phenomenon becomes less distinct. Scientists remain cautious, emphasizing the need for thorough analysis and controlled investigation. But outside the scientific community, interpretations are expanding rapidly. Social media platforms have amplified every new image, every recorded sound, every unusual finding, creating a global conversation that blends evidence with speculation. The situation is further complicated by the historical depth of the region. The land surrounding the Euphrates has been inhabited continuously for thousands of years. Empires have risen and fallen along its banks, leaving behind layers of construction, destruction, and reconstruction. It is entirely possible that what is now being uncovered are remnants of ancient settlements, structures that were lost to time and gradually buried beneath shifting water levels. Archaeological records show that entire cities have disappeared beneath rivers due to natural changes in course or catastrophic flooding events. When water recedes, these lost worlds can reappear, offering glimpses into civilizations that were once thought to be gone forever. However, even within this framework, there are aspects of the current discoveries that do not align neatly with known history. Some structures appear to be positioned in ways that do not correspond with documented settlement patterns. Others are located at depths that suggest they were not simply covered by gradual sedimentation, but intentionally placed or sealed. This distinction is critical because it changes the narrative from one of accidental burial to one of deliberate concealment. If something was intentionally hidden beneath the Euphrates, then the question is no longer just what it is, but why it was hidden in the first place. At this point, the drying of the river becomes more than an environmental event. It becomes a process of revelation, not in the religious sense necessarily, but in the literal sense of something being uncovered. Each layer of sediment removed by retreating water exposes another layer of history, and with it, another set of questions. The pace at which this is happening adds to the sense of urgency. What might have taken centuries to uncover under normal conditions is now being revealed in a matter of years or even months. And so the focus begins to shift again, from the river itself to what lies beneath it. The shrinking waterline is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of something else. Something that has been waiting, perhaps, for a very long time, for this exact set of conditions to occur. The drying of the Euphrates may be explained by climate data and human activity, but the consequences of that drying are opening doors that no one fully understands yet. And as those doors begin to open, the question that remains is not whether the river is disappearing, but what else is emerging along with it. As researchers push deeper into the newly exposed sections of the riverbed, what began as a routine environmental survey quickly transformed into something far more complex. The deployment of AI-assisted drones allowed access to areas that had remained unreachable for generations, navigating narrow cavities and unstable sediment layers beneath the surface. It was during one of these scans that the first anomaly appeared. The drone's imaging system captured surfaces that did not resemble natural geological formations. Instead of irregular erosion patterns or fractured rock, there were straight edges, sharply defined angles, and repeated markings that maintained consistent spacing and depth. These were not random. They were structured. In archaeology, such precision is rarely attributed to natural processes. Erosion, even over thousands of years, does not produce symmetry with intention. What the drone recorded suggested design. The presence of linear geometry beneath a river that had flowed continuously for centuries immediately challenged existing assumptions about the site. The deeper the drone descended, the clearer these features became. The system's edge detection algorithms highlighted boundaries that held their form across multiple frames, resisting distortion even as sediment shifted slightly with the drone's movement. The markings appeared in sequences, repeating at intervals that implied deliberate placement rather than coincidence. When cross-referenced with known scripts, including early cuneiform and Proto-Semitic inscriptions, the system returned no exact match. Partial similarities were noted, but nothing definitive. This absence of classification added another layer of uncertainty. If the markings were human-made, they did not belong to any documented writing system in the region. That alone would be significant. But the context made it even more unsettling. These features were not located near known ruins, not aligned with mapped settlements, and not positioned along ancient trade routes. They existed beneath what had once been an active section of the river, buried under layers of compacted sediment that suggested long-term submersion. According to archaeological standards, structures discovered in river environments are typically associated with collapsed settlements or gradual sediment accumulation over time. UNESCO reports on Mesopotamian heritage sites consistently show that ancient constructions tend to remain closer to the surface, even when partially buried. The idea of a fully formed structure existing deep beneath a riverbed, preserved rather than eroded, does not align with common patterns. This discrepancy led researchers to consider an alternative explanation. If the structure was not gradually covered by natural processes, then it may have been placed there intentionally. The implications of that possibility are difficult to ignore. It suggests planning, foresight, and a purpose that extends beyond conventional construction. As scanning continued, the drone's sensors detected a shift in material density ahead. The irregular textures of sediment gave way to surfaces that were smoother, more uniform, and distinctly artificial in composition. The transition was abrupt, as if the natural environment had been interrupted by something inserted into it. The drone stabilized, hovering in place while its systems adjusted for closer inspection. What emerged on the display was not a fragmented ruin, but a coherent structure. Large stone blocks appeared to be fitted together with precision, their seams nearly invisible. There was no evidence of mortar, no signs of repair or collapse, and no irregularities that would suggest deterioration over time. Each block seemed to have been shaped and placed with exact intention, forming a barrier that separated the drone's current position from whatever lay beyond. At this point, the investigation moved beyond identification and into interpretation. The presence of a constructed barrier beneath the river raised immediate questions about function. In ancient architecture, enclosed spaces serve specific purposes. They protect, they store, or they contain. The uniformity of the structure suggested that it was not meant to be temporary. It was built to endure. The absence of external damage indicated that it had succeeded. Even after centuries of water pressure, sediment accumulation, and environmental change, it remained intact. This level of preservation is rare, especially in submerged conditions. It pointed to a level of engineering that, while not impossible for ancient civilizations, was certainly uncommon in this context. Thermal imaging provided the next critical insight. Behind the stone barrier, there was a measurable difference in temperature, subtle but consistent. This indicated the presence of an internal cavity, a space that was not filled with solid material. Sonar mapping confirmed the outline of this void, revealing a shape that resembled a chamber rather than a natural hollow. The dimensions were regular, with a rectangular base and a slightly curved upper boundary, suggesting intentional design rather than geological formation. There were no secondary openings, no fractures leading outward, and no evidence of collapse from above. The chamber was contained, isolated, and sealed on all sides except for the barrier itself. In ancient construction, sealed chambers are not unheard of. They have been used to protect valuable objects, sacred artifacts, or burial remains. However, their placement is typically associated with temples, tombs, or fortified structures, not beneath active riverbeds. National Geographic has documented cases where civilizations created hidden vaults to safeguard items of significance. But these were usually located within accessible terrain, not submerged environments subject to constant water flow. The decision to place such a structure beneath a river introduces a level of complexity that suggests a very specific intention. It was not just hidden. It was concealed in a way that relied on the river itself as a protective layer. This realization shifted the focus of the investigation once again. The question was no longer limited to what the structure was, but why it had been positioned in such an unusual location. If the chamber had been built before the river changed course, it would imply that the builders anticipated or adapted to environmental shifts. If it had been constructed after the river was already present, it would require a level of engineering that allowed for underwater or near-water construction with long-term durability. Both scenarios are possible, but neither is easily explained without further evidence. As the drone moved closer to the barrier, additional details came into view. The surface of the stone was not entirely smooth. Carved into the upper section were symbols, repeated with exact spacing across the width of the structure. These markings were shallow, but deliberate, their lines controlled and consistent. They did not resemble decorative art. They appeared functional, as if they served a purpose beyond aesthetics. The repetition of the symbols suggested a pattern, possibly a code or a form of identification. Yet once again, no direct match could be found in existing databases of ancient scripts. This absence of recognition did not prove that the symbols were unknown, but it did indicate that they were not widely documented. The drone's sensors detected another anomaly as it hovered near the base of the barrier. A faint indentation ran horizontally along the lower edge, partially obscured by hardened sediment. The line was too straight to be natural, too precise to be the result of erosion. It resembled the outline of a sealed entrance, a doorway that had been closed and then buried over time. The sediment surrounding it showed layers of accumulation that suggested long-term coverage, not recent disturbance. This reinforced the idea that the structure had been intentionally sealed before being hidden by the river. At this stage, the investigation reached a critical point. The existence of a sealed chamber beneath the Euphrates was no longer speculative. It had been observed, mapped, and confirmed through multiple scanning methods. What remained uncertain was its purpose. Theories began to emerge, each attempting to reconcile the physical evidence with known historical and cultural practices. Some researchers leaned toward a practical explanation, suggesting that the chamber could be a storage vault or a protective enclosure for valuable materials. Others considered the possibility of a ceremonial function, a space designed for rituals or symbolic containment. However, there was another line of thought that could not be easily dismissed. The precision of the structure, the absence of access points, and the deliberate concealment beneath a river all pointed toward containment rather than storage. In other words, the chamber may not have been built to protect something valuable, but to isolate something that was not meant to be accessed. This interpretation is more difficult to support with direct evidence, but it aligns with certain patterns observed in ancient construction, where boundaries were created not just to preserve, but to restrict. The timing of the discovery adds another layer to this interpretation. The chamber did not become visible through excavation or intentional search. It appeared as a result of environmental change. The river receded, and with it, the barrier that had concealed the structure for generations was removed. This sequence of events raises a question that extends beyond archaeology. If the chamber was meant to remain hidden, then its exposure was not planned by its builders. It was triggered by external factors that have only recently come into play. This leads to a broader consideration of how natural processes can intersect with human history in unexpected ways. Climate change, water management, and technological advancement have combined to create conditions that did not exist in the past. These conditions are revealing things that were not meant to be seen, at least not in the context of the original construction. The chamber beneath the Euphrates is one such example. It existed, unchanged and undisturbed, until a combination of modern factors brought it back into view. As researchers continue to analyze the data, the chamber remains sealed. No attempt has been made to breach the barrier, and for good reason. Opening such a structure would not only risk damaging whatever lies within, but also alter the context that makes it significant. Archaeology often depends on preservation as much as discovery. Once a sealed environment is opened, it can never be returned to its original state. For now, Observation remains the primary approach, and yet, even without direct access, the implications are already profound. A deliberately constructed, precisely sealed chamber exists beneath a river that is now disappearing. It was hidden for centuries, possibly longer, and has only now become visible due to a convergence of environmental and technological factors. Whether it contains artifacts, remains, or something else entirely is still unknown. But the fact that it exists at all is enough to challenge existing narratives about the region's history. As the investigation expanded beyond the sealed structure and into the surrounding areas, newly exposed by the retreating waters, attention began to shift toward objects emerging directly from the riverbed itself. These were not architectural features or geological anomalies, but physical artifacts, tangible items that could be examined, measured, and compared. Among the most striking of these discoveries was a weapon unlike anything previously documented in the region. Local villagers were the first to uncover it, partially embedded in hardened sediment along a stretch of exposed ground where water had only recently receded. At first glance, it appeared to be a corroded piece of metal, its surface covered in layers of mineral deposits accumulated over long periods of submersion. But as it was carefully extracted from the surrounding mud, its true form became clear. It was a sword, and not just any sword, but one of unusual size and proportion. Archaeologists called to the site conducted preliminary measurements and observations. The blade was significantly wider than typical ancient weapons found in Mesopotamian contexts, and its length exceeded standard proportions associated with known sword typologies from the region. Historical records of weapons from civilizations such as the Sumerians, Akkadians, Babylonians, and Assyrians show a consistent range of sizes adapted to the physical capabilities of the average human soldier. Even ceremonial or symbolic weapons rarely deviate far from these dimensions. Yet, this particular artifact did not fit within any established category. Its scale suggested it was either designed for a purpose outside conventional combat or intended for a user whose physical characteristics differed substantially from the norm. The absence of comparable examples in existing archaeological databases made classification difficult. Metallurgical analysis, while still ongoing, indicated that the composition of the blade was consistent with ancient forging techniques, though the degree of preservation complicated precise dating. The weight of the weapon also raised questions. Reports from the excavation team noted that it required more than one person to lift it comfortably, suggesting that it was not designed for standard use in battle. This observation alone does not confirm anything extraordinary, but it introduces a discrepancy that demands explanation. If the sword was functional, then it implies a user capable of wielding it. If it was symbolic, then its exaggerated proportions may have been intended to convey power, status, or mythological significance. This is where historical interpretation begins to intersect with cultural narrative. In the absence of direct evidence, comparisons are often drawn from known texts and traditions. One of the most frequently referenced figures in this context is Goliath, described in the first book of Samuel as a giant warrior whose height, in some translations, exceeds 2.7 meters. The story itself is widely known, not only as a religious account, but as a cultural archetype representing the confrontation between overwhelming force and unlikely resistance. While the biblical narrative does not provide detailed descriptions of Goliath's weaponry beyond mentioning his spear and armor, the idea of a warrior of such size naturally leads to speculation about the scale of the tools he would have used. In addition to Goliath, the broader concept of giants appears in various ancient texts, including the reference to the Nephilim in Genesis 6:4. These figures are described as beings of great size and strength, often associated with a time of moral and physical upheaval. Interpretations of the Nephilim vary widely, ranging from symbolic representations of power to literal accounts of a distinct group of individuals. Modern science has not provided evidence supporting the existence of such beings, and most scholars approach these descriptions as part of mythological or theological frameworks rather than historical fact. However, when an artifact emerges that does not conform to expected human dimensions, it inevitably invites comparison to these narratives. It is important to approach such connections with caution. The presence of an unusually large sword does not confirm the existence of giants, nor does it validate any specific interpretation of ancient texts. At the same time, it cannot be dismissed outright as irrelevant. Artifacts that deviate from established patterns often serve as catalysts for new lines of inquiry. They challenge assumptions and force researchers to consider possibilities that may not fit neatly within existing frameworks. In this case, the sword stands as an anomaly, a physical object that resists easy explanation and therefore demands further investigation. As studies continue, efforts are being made to trace the origin of the weapon through comparative analysis. Similarities in design, material composition, and manufacturing technique are being evaluated against known collections from museums and excavation sites across the Middle East. So far, no direct match has been identified. This does not necessarily mean the artifact is unique, but it does suggest that it may belong to a category that has not yet been fully documented. Whether this reflects a gap in the archaeological record or the presence of something genuinely uncommon remains to be seen. While the discovery of the sword captured immediate attention, it was not the only finding to emerge from the drying riverbed. In nearby areas, survey teams began to uncover clusters of ceramic vessels partially buried in compacted silt. At first, these appeared to be ordinary storage jars, the kind commonly used in ancient societies for holding food, water, or other materials. However, as more sediment was cleared away, a pattern began to form. The vessels were not scattered randomly, as might be expected from debris carried by water or abandoned during settlement collapse. Instead, they were positioned with clear intention, spaced at regular intervals and oriented in a consistent direction. This level of organization suggested deliberate placement rather than accidental deposition. Archaeologists proceeded with careful excavation, documenting the position of each vessel before attempting to open them. What they found inside added a new layer of complexity to the site. Rather than containing remnants of food or tools, the jars held fragments of bone. These were not complete skeletons, nor were they arranged in a manner consistent with known burial practices. Instead, the bones appeared to have been selected, separated, and placed within the vessels with a degree of care that implied purpose. Some jars contained only a few fragments, while others held multiple pieces arranged in layers. There was no evidence of random breakage or damage caused by external forces. The arrangement was controlled, intentional, and consistent across multiple specimens. This discovery immediately raised questions about the cultural context of the practice. According to research published in the Journal of Archaeological Science, ancient burial traditions typically follow recognizable patterns, including the inclusion of grave goods, markers, or specific positioning of remains. Even in cases of secondary burial, where bones are relocated after initial decomposition, there are established rituals that guide the process. The absence of these elements in the Euphrates site is significant. There were no inscriptions, no names, no offerings, and no indications of reverence or commemoration. The vessels did not appear to serve as memorials. Instead, they functioned as containers, sealed and placed in a way that suggests containment rather than remembrance. Further examination of the vessels revealed another unusual feature. Each jar was adorned with a raised design that encircled its exterior. This design took the form of a serpent, its body coiled around the vessel and its head positioned near the opening. The serpent was not painted or added after the fact. It was molded directly into the clay, forming an integral part of the vessel's structure. The level of detail varied, but the overall motif remained consistent across multiple jars. The serpent's presence is particularly noteworthy, given its symbolic significance in many ancient cultures. In Mesopotamian mythology, serpents are often associated with chaos, transformation, and the boundary between life and death. In other traditions, they represent knowledge, danger, or forbidden power. The combination of bone fragments contained within sealed vessels and the recurring serpent motif creates a symbolic framework that is difficult to ignore. It suggests that the act of sealing these remains was not purely practical, but carried meaning beyond physical preservation. The serpent, as a symbol, may have been intended to signify protection, warning, or control. This interpretation leads to a broader consideration of the function of these vessels. If they were not used for burial in the traditional sense, then their purpose must lie elsewhere. One possibility is that they were used to isolate or contain something perceived as harmful or significant. This concept is not without precedent. Historical records show that certain cultures developed methods for containing objects or substances believed to possess dangerous properties, whether physical, spiritual, or symbolic. In such cases, the act of sealing is not about honoring what is inside, but about ensuring that it remains separated from the outside world. The placement of the vessels along the riverbed adds another dimension to this interpretation. Water has long been used as a natural boundary, a medium that both conceals and protects. By placing sealed containers beneath or near a river, ancient builders could rely on the constant movement and depth of water to maintain isolation. Over time, as sediment accumulated, these vessels would become further buried, effectively removed from sight and access. The fact that they are only now being revealed suggests that this method of concealment was effective for a very long time. As with the sealed chamber, the exposure of these vessels is not the result of intentional excavation, but of environmental change. The receding water has uncovered items that were not meant to be seen, at least not under normal circumstances. This pattern of emergence, where hidden objects appear as a direct consequence of shifting natural conditions, reinforces the idea that the current state of the Euphrates is acting as a trigger for broader revelations. Each discovery builds upon the last, creating a chain of evidence that is both intriguing and difficult to interpret within a single framework. Researchers continue to approach these findings with caution, emphasizing the need for controlled analysis and avoiding premature conclusions. The sword, the vessels, and the sealed chamber each represent pieces of a larger puzzle, one that is still far from complete. Yet even at this stage, certain themes are beginning to emerge. There is a consistent emphasis on concealment, on the deliberate separation of objects from their surroundings, and on the use of natural elements to maintain that separation over time. Whether these practices were driven by practical concerns, cultural beliefs, or something else entirely remains an open question. What is clear is that the drying of the Euphrates is not simply uncovering isolated artifacts. It is revealing patterns of behavior, decisions made by people in the past who understood the importance of hiding certain things from the future. As those hidden elements come back into view, they challenge our understanding of history and force us to reconsider the boundaries between known and unknown. The sword raises questions about scale and use. The vessels raise questions about purpose and symbolism. Together, they point toward a deeper narrative, one that has yet to be fully uncovered but is already beginning to take shape. As the scope of observation widened beyond localized discoveries along the Euphrates, a new layer of complexity began to emerge, one that extended far beyond the boundaries of a single river system. What initially appeared to be a series of isolated anomalies started to take on a broader context. when events occurring in entirely different parts of the world were placed side by side in time. Among the most unusual of these developments was the reported formation of snow within a cave system located near the upper reaches of the Euphrates, an environment where such conditions are not typically sustained. Almost simultaneously, thousands of kilometers away, the United States experienced one of its most severe and prolonged cold periods in recent years. According to data released by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, the winter of 2021 to 2022 included multiple extreme cold waves, with temperatures in certain regions dropping far below seasonal averages and remaining there for extended durations. Meteorological analysis attributed these conditions to disruptions in the polar vortex and shifts in atmospheric circulation patterns, phenomena that are increasingly studied within the broader context of climate variability. Individually, each of these events can be explained within established scientific frameworks. Cold air outbreaks, unusual snowfall patterns, and localized microclimates are all documented occurrences. The formation of snow in a cave environment, while uncommon, can result from specific combinations of temperature gradients, humidity levels, and airflow dynamics. Similarly, the intensification of winter conditions in North America has been linked to measurable changes in global climate systems. However, when these events are considered not in isolation but in temporal proximity, a different kind of interpretation begins to take shape. The human tendency to identify patterns, especially when multiple anomalies align in time, leads to the perception of connection, even when causation is not immediately evident. This is where the narrative begins to move beyond empirical observation and into the realm of interpretation. For some, the simultaneity of these events suggests more than coincidence. It raises the possibility that disparate phenomena may be linked by underlying mechanisms that are not yet fully understood. In a purely scientific context, this would prompt further investigation into global climate interactions, teleconnections between atmospheric systems, and the cascading effects of environmental change. Yet outside the scientific community, the same alignment is often viewed through a different lens, one shaped by historical, cultural, and religious narratives. The reference to snow as something stored and released at specific times appears in the book of Job, where it is described as being held in reserve, awaiting a moment of purpose. In its original context, this language is widely understood as poetic, part of a broader expression of natural forces under divine control. However, when contemporary events seem to echo these descriptions, even in a metaphorical sense, the distinction between symbolism and observation becomes less clear for those who are inclined to draw connections. The question is not whether the text predicted a specific event, but why certain descriptions continue to resonate when similar patterns appear in the modern world. It is important to recognize that the perception of pattern does not necessarily indicate the presence of a causal relationship. Correlation does not imply causation, a principle that remains central to scientific reasoning. At the same time, the recurrence of similar motifs across different domains, environmental, historical, and textual, invites further examination. It suggests that the frameworks we use to interpret events are influenced not only by data, but by the narratives we inherit and the meanings we assign to them. In this case, the convergence of unusual climatic conditions near the Euphrates and extreme weather patterns elsewhere has created a sense of synchronicity that is difficult to dismiss entirely, even if it cannot be conclusively explained. As attention continued to expand beyond immediate physical discoveries, another site began to draw renewed interest, one that has long been recognized for its historical significance, but is now being re-examined in light of emerging questions. The ancient city of Mari, located along the Euphrates, was once a major center of political and economic activity in the region. Excavations conducted over the past century have revealed extensive palace complexes, administrative archives, and evidence of sophisticated urban planning. Yet within these findings, certain anomalies have persisted. Elements that do not align with typical patterns of preservation and documentation. Recent analyses have focused on a collection of clay tablets recovered from the site, many of which appear intact in form but devoid of readable content. According to reports from the French Institute for Near Eastern Archaeology, the IFPO, these tablets show clear signs of having been deliberately altered. The surfaces have been scraped clean, removing inscriptions that would have otherwise provided insight into the administrative, economic, or cultural practices of the time. This process is not consistent with natural erosion or damage caused by environmental factors. It is precise, targeted, and intentional. In archaeological terms, such actions are rare and significant. The removal of written content from durable materials like clay suggests a conscious effort to erase information while preserving the physical medium itself. This distinction is critical. If the goal had been simple destruction, the tablets could have been broken or discarded. Instead, they were left structurally intact, their surfaces smoothed in a way that indicates careful handling. This implies that the act was not about eliminating the objects, but about controlling the information they contained. In modern terms, it would be comparable to redacting a document while leaving its existence visible. The message is not that nothing was there, but that what was there is no longer accessible. Further investigation of the Mari site has revealed additional features that reinforce the theme of deliberate concealment. Certain architectural elements, initially interpreted as corridors or passageways, do not connect to functional areas of the complex. They lead to enclosed spaces, terminate abruptly, or serve no apparent purpose in terms of movement or access. Their dimensions are inconsistent with standard pathways, suggesting that they were not designed for regular use. Instead, they appear to have been constructed as barriers or containment zones, spaces that restrict rather than facilitate interaction. Within some of these areas, archaeologists have documented the presence of human remains arranged in a manner that deviates from recognized burial customs. The positioning of the skeletons lacks the markers of ritual or ceremony that are typically associated with funerary practices. There are no accompanying artifacts, no signs of individual recognition, and no evidence of symbolic placement. The remains are organized, but not in a way that conveys reverence. This pattern suggests a process that is systematic rather than ceremonial, one that prioritizes order and containment over remembrance. The presence of sealed chambers within the site further complicates the picture. These spaces have been closed off with reinforced materials, their entrances deliberately blocked in a manner that indicates long-term intention. The construction of such barriers requires effort and resources, implying that whatever lay within was considered significant enough to warrant protection or isolation. As with the sealed structure beneath the river, the question arises not only of what these spaces contain, but why they were designed to remain inaccessible. Taken together, these elements point toward a pattern that extends beyond individual artifacts or structures. They suggest a coordinated approach to managing information, materials, and possibly even remain in a way that limits future access. This is not merely a matter of loss through time, but of intentional omission. The historical record in this context is not simply incomplete. It has been actively shaped by decisions made in the past about what should be preserved and what should be removed. This realization introduces a broader question about the nature of historical knowledge. Archaeology is often described as the study of what remains, the reconstruction of past events based on surviving evidence. But if certain elements were deliberately erased or concealed, then the picture we reconstruct is inherently partial. It reflects not only what happened, but what was allowed to be remembered. The discoveries at Mari highlight this limitation, revealing gaps that are not the result of decay or chance, but of choice. As the Euphrates continues to recede and new areas become accessible, the connection between these findings and the broader pattern of concealment becomes more apparent. The river, once a barrier that protected what lay beneath it, is no longer fulfilling that role. The exposure of hidden structures and artifacts is occurring alongside the re-examination of sites like Mari, where evidence of deliberate erasure has already been documented. Together, these developments suggest that the current moment is not just about uncovering isolated pieces of history, but about confronting the processes that have shaped what we know and what we do not. The alignment of environmental change, unusual global phenomena, and the re-emergence of concealed historical elements creates a narrative that is both complex and unresolved. Each component can be analyzed within its own domain: climate science, archaeology, historical interpretation. Yet their convergence invites a more integrated perspective. It raises the possibility that the boundaries between these domains are more fluid than we typically assume, and that events in one sphere can influence or illuminate those in another. At this stage, there are no definitive answers, only a growing body of observations that challenge existing frameworks. The snow in the cave, the extreme winter conditions, the altered tablets, and the sealed structures each contribute to a larger picture that is still forming. Whether this picture will ultimately align with established explanations or require new ones remains to be seen. What is certain is that the process of discovery is ongoing, and that each new finding has the potential to reshape our understanding of both the past and the present. As investigations continued along the increasingly exposed stretches of the Euphrates, attention was drawn to another phenomenon that, while less structural than the discoveries beneath the surface, carried a different kind of impact. In several locations, observers began reporting that sections of the river had taken on a reddish coloration, at times faint and diluted, at other moments noticeably deep, spreading through the current in a way that seemed to originate from within rather than from surface disturbance. The change was not uniform across the entire river, nor was it constant, but its appearance was documented often enough to raise concern among both local communities and environmental observers. Initial explanations focused on known biological and geological processes. Environmental specialists pointed to the possibility of red algae blooms, which under certain conditions can produce pigments that tint water in shades ranging from rust to crimson. Others suggested that disturbed sediment, particularly iron-rich deposits, could create a similar visual effect when suspended in moving water. These interpretations are consistent with documented cases in other river systems, where shifts in temperature, nutrient levels, or water flow have led to temporary changes in coloration. However, what made this instance different was the lack of a clearly identified trigger. At the time the phenomenon was observed, there were no reports of significant upstream disturbances, no major flooding events, and no immediate confirmation of algae concentrations sufficient to account for the scale of the color change. This absence of a definitive explanation did not invalidate the scientific possibilities, but it left the phenomenon in a state of uncertainty that allowed for broader interpretation. The visual impact of a river turning red is difficult to separate from its symbolic associations. Throughout history, water has been more than a physical resource. It has been a carrier of meaning, often representing life, purity, and continuity. When that same water takes on the appearance of blood, the symbolism shifts dramatically. In biblical narratives, the transformation of water into blood is one of the most well-known signs of judgment, a disruption of natural order that signals a deeper imbalance. While there is no direct evidence linking the observed changes in the Euphrates to any such event, the imagery alone is enough to evoke strong reactions. People standing along the riverbanks, witnessing the altered color firsthand, are not just observing a chemical or biological process. They are encountering a visual that carries layers of meaning shaped by centuries of cultural and religious context. From a psychological perspective, such imagery can have a profound effect. Studies in environmental perception have shown that unexpected changes in familiar natural features often trigger heightened emotional responses, particularly when those changes resemble known symbols of danger or disruption. The human mind does not process visual information in isolation. It connects what is seen with what is remembered, drawing on narratives that provide context and meaning. In this case, the sight of red water in a river, historically associated with prophetic language, creates a convergence between observation and interpretation that is difficult to disentangle. Even for those who approach the phenomenon from a purely scientific standpoint, the visual alone is enough to prompt reflection. As with the other developments surrounding the Euphrates, the key question is not whether there is a scientific explanation, but how that explanation interacts with the broader context in which the event is occurring. The river is not changing in isolation. It is drying, revealing structures, exposing artifacts, and coinciding with other unusual observations both locally and globally. Each of these elements can be examined independently, but together they form a sequence that feels interconnected. The red coloration of the water becomes another piece of this sequence, another event that adds to the growing sense that something larger is unfolding, even if that larger pattern remains undefined. At this point, the narrative has moved far beyond a single phenomenon. What began as an environmental observation has expanded into a complex web of discoveries and interpretations. The drying river has exposed hidden structures that challenge conventional archaeological expectations. Sealed chambers have raised questions about intentional concealment. Artifacts of unusual scale have prompted reconsideration of historical assumptions. Organized remains within sealed vessels have suggested practices that do not align with known cultural patterns. Climatic anomalies occurring in distant regions have introduced the possibility of broader connections. And now, the visual transformation of the river itself adds a symbolic dimension that cannot be easily dismissed. Each of these elements, taken on its own, can be approached with established methods of analysis. Scientists can measure water levels, analyze sediment composition, and model climate patterns. Archaeologists can document structures, compare artifacts, and interpret cultural practices. Historians can examine texts, trace narratives, and contextualize events. But when all of these elements appear together, within a relatively short span of time and within a shared geographic or symbolic framework, the process of interpretation becomes more complex. It requires not only the application of specialized knowledge, but also an awareness of how different domains of understanding intersect. This is where the situation surrounding the Euphrates becomes particularly compelling. It is not defined by a single discovery or a single explanation. It is defined by convergence. Environmental change, technological capability, historical depth, and cultural narrative are all intersecting in a way that brings previously hidden elements into view. The river is receding, and with it, layers of both physical and symbolic significance are being uncovered. The question is not simply what is being revealed, but how those revelations are being interpreted and what they suggest about the relationship between past and present. In the absence of definitive answers, it is natural to consider multiple possibilities. One interpretation is that what we are witnessing is a series of unrelated events, each with its own explanation, coincidentally occurring within the same time frame. Climate change affects river systems, geological processes produce unusual sounds, archaeological sites yield unexpected findings, and biological factors alter water coloration. From this perspective, the narrative is one of complexity rather than connection, a reminder that the natural world is capable of producing a wide range of phenomena without requiring a single unifying cause. Another interpretation, however, considers the possibility that these events are not entirely independent. It suggests that there may be underlying relationships, whether physical, historical, or symbolic, that link them in ways not yet fully understood. This does not necessarily imply a predetermined outcome or a specific prediction, but it does open the door to the idea that certain conditions, when aligned, can reveal patterns that are otherwise hidden. In this view, the current state of the Euphrates is not just a result of environmental change, but a catalyst for broader discovery. As the river continues to recede and more of its bed becomes exposed, the process of uncovering is likely to continue. New structures may be revealed, additional artifacts may emerge, and further anomalies may be observed. Each new finding will add to the existing body of evidence, either reinforcing current interpretations or challenging them. The pace of discovery, driven by both natural processes and technological tools, suggests that the situation is still evolving. What we see now may only be an early stage in a longer sequence of revelations, and this brings the focus back to a fundamental question, one that cannot be answered by data alone. When we look at the Euphrates today, at its shrinking waters, its exposed depths, its altered appearance, we are not just observing a river. We are observing a point of intersection between multiple layers of meaning. It is a place where history, environment, and narrative converge, where the past is no longer fully hidden and the present is no longer entirely stable. So the question is not simply what is happening, but how we choose to understand it. Are we looking at a series of coincidences, each explainable within its own domain? Or are we witnessing fragments of a larger story that is yet to be fully revealed? Is the river giving up what it once concealed by chance? Or is the timing of its transformation part of a sequence that extends beyond immediate causes? And perhaps most importantly, as more of what was hidden comes into view, are we prepared to interpret it only through what we already know? Or are we willing to consider that some of it may point to something we have not yet fully understood? Because if these events are not random, if they are connected in ways that are only beginning to emerge, then the real question is no longer about the river itself. It becomes a question about perspective. Are we uncovering history piece by piece as conditions allow? Or are we approaching a boundary that was never meant to be crossed? And if the answer lies somewhere between those possibilities, then what we are witnessing now may not be the end of a story, but the beginning of one that has been waiting quietly for the moment when it could finally be seen again. Please let me know your thoughts in the comments. If you found this video even a little interesting, I would truly appreciate it if you could give it a like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you very much for watching until the end.